3, 2, 1.
Voice with Julia. Change your voice. Change your life.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Voice with Julia's Technique Talks, where we demystify conversations surrounding vocal technique with behind-the-scenes access to great singers of today. I'm your host, Julia Radosh, and with me here today is Jorell Williams, the wonderful baritone. How are you, Jorell?
Hi, Julie. How are you?
Good, good. It's so nice to have you here today.
Thanks for having me.
And I just want to update our audience on how awesome Jorell is. He and I go way back, but since I first met Jorell, he has been quite busy, and I will give you a glimpse into that right now. Grammy-nominated Jorell Williams is an American operatic baritone with a wide range of experience from standard repertoire to premier pieces. He has performed with companies such as Seattle Opera, Sante Fe Opera, Victory Hall Opera, Opera Birmingham, Opera Maine, Atlanta Opera, and New York City Opera, amongst others. His resume includes roles such as Dr. Falke in Die Fledermaus, Nardo in La Finta Giardiniera, Hannah Before in As One, Jake in Porgy and Bess, Escamillo in Carmen, Figaro in Le Nozze di Figaro, Tarquinius in The Rape of Lucretia, 𝐸𝐼𝐻𝐿𝐼 in 𝐸𝐼𝐻𝐿𝐼, and Milord Arespin in L'Italiana in Londra. Mr. Williams is a much in-demand interpreter of contemporary opera and has created roles in several world premieres, notably John David Ernest's The Theory of Everything with Encompass New Opera Theatre, John Mustow's Bastianello with Rochester Lyric Opera, and workshops of Michael Turca's Senna, Nico Muhly's Two Boys, and Ricky Ian Gordon's Intimate Apparel with the Metropolitan Opera. Mr. Williams has recorded world premieres by Wynton Marsalis, Lauryn Hill, Erykah Badu, David Lang's Difficulty of Crossing a Field with Beth Morrison's Projects, Opera News Top Critics' Choice of 2015, and most recently, Jennifer Higdon's 2017 Grammy-nominated Cold Mountain with the Sante Fe Opera. Jorell made his off-Broadway debut in Kurt Weill's Lost in the Stars with New York City Center Encores and has toured as a soloist with the Mark Morris Dance Group. He has performed with Wynton Marsalis and the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra in A Celebration of America, at the Kennedy Center's Eisenhower Theater on the occasion of the first presidential inauguration of Barack Obama, as well as the European premiere of Marsalis's Abyssinian Mass at the Barbican during the 2012 Olympics in London. Jorell is a recipient and garners top awards from the Gerda Listner International Competition, Schuyler Foundation for Career Bridges, and Licia Albanese Puccini Foundation, amongst others. He was a resident artist of the American Opera Project's Composers and the Voice Series, Sante Fe Opera, Chautauqua Opera, Caramore Bel Canto Program, Opera North, the Steens Institute of Music at the Ravinia Festival, Songfest Los Angeles, Des Moines Metro Opera, and the Westchester Vocal Institute. Wow, you've done a lot, Jorell. And I think a lot of that has been done after we first met. So that's awesome.
Yeah. It's so weird hearing things read back in another voice because we only hear it how we hear it when we're talking to ourselves and doing our editing.
And do you think like when you hear it read back, are you thinking like, damn, I'm good?
No, I'm thinking, wow, that's like obnoxious. But also it's like, did that actually happen? And then you try to figure out like, how old was I? Like, it seems like it was so long ago. And some of the stuff is more recent, but it's just a weird conundrum that you're constantly, fighting with yourself. Like, where am I right now?
Yeah. I'd love to kind of start where your bio is and how it sort of centers around your technique, because when I see how many awesome things you've done and kind of different, like really different, I won't say genres, but I will say like vocalisms. Okay. because we have like 𝐸𝐼𝐶𝐞𝐬𝐬 at one spectrum, and then we have, you know, a lot of the contemporary opera you're doing, and plus some of these projects with these recording artists. So can you talk to me a little bit about how you approach your technique when you're singing different styles of music and how that influences your technique?
Absolutely. So it might come as a surprise to know that my dad, well, both of my parents were singers. They both grew up in church, both sang in church. My dad still has a full-time professional singing career. You can look him up. His name is James D. Train Williams. He does funk, pop, all the stuff that you can think of from the 70s, 80s. He had a bunch of hits. And it's just random growing up in a household where you listen to everything: country, R&B, jazz, classical music, like the musical theater, the whole gamut. And so at a young age, I always knew that music would be a central part of my life, and not in the way that I expected, because I came from piano. When I was age 4, I started piano, and that's what I wanted to do. I didn't want to sing. I occasionally sang with an a cappella group, but transitioning into a career of opera, I realized that while it is my mainstream profession, I never wanted to lose the foundation of why I was a performer, and that included every other genre of music. And so one of the things I talk about frequently, whether I'm talking about technique or working on style, is that your technique is your technique. And based on that, your breathing is your breathing. And those two go hand in hand, one before the other. So you have to breathe before you have any technique. You have to know how your body works. And with classical trained musicians, a lot of the time there's a misconception that by being classically trained, you only sing classical music. That is false. That is incorrect, 1000%. If you're classically trained, it aids to you singing jazz. It aids to you singing blues. It aids to you singing whatever you want to do. It's just basically planting or implanting that idea that your technique and your breathing allows you to do a lot of the melismas that you hear in pop and R&B music, a lot of the cadenzas that you hear in bel canto, a lot of the scatting that you hear in jazz. It's all the same thing as long as your foundation is based on your breathing.
Okay. So breathing is like really, really the important key for you with technique. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yes.
Can you tell me how you breathe, and maybe how you came to breathe how you breathe now?
Yes. So I was always told as a young singer that your support is what will help you sustain. And while I had an idea of what that meant, I never really understood how that applied to me consistently. And so in my practice, let me go back. In my performance, I was consistent because there's this an automated energy, this adrenaline rush that you get to perform that can cover up some mistakes and some holes. But in your practice, when you're working with coaches and your teacher and a conductor, it's like, that's not a supported sound. You need to fix that. Or breathe with me. And at the time, it's like, okay, I am breathing with you. But there was a misconception to me what that actually meant. It's like, I just inhaled. No, they meant actually find where your center is, use that, and catapult your voice. And it took me years. And I remember being in grad school, and the artistic director of the opera program, we chatted about just technical aspects of singing. And she said, well, why don't you work with a specialist? And basically, when you do that, it will take you to a level where you don't think that you would have been had you not taken the time to really focus on this one thing. And doing so, what will happen is you will take the time off to reconfigure your breathing. Ultimately, that will realign what your technique should be, and will be your foundation from today moving forward for the rest of your career. And of course, you tweak and you twain as long as you go, because as performers, we have to be educated, and we have to know that you can be singing for 10 years, and in 10 years, my voice is going to be completely different. So you adjust accordingly. That includes your breathing. And the minute I spent a couple of days just sitting on it, and I went to go work with the teacher, and for an entire year, all we did was breathing exercises on vowels and trying to figure out why my body was not consistently moving, or at least moving to the sense of how to use the air properly. And it was all mental. Because when I didn't think about it, I was breathing correctly. And in those moments, it's like, there it is. What was different? And it's like, I don't know. It just,
Can you describe at this point, what were you doing that was incorrect? And then
everything.
What did you fix? Okay.
Everything was incorrect. My whole perception of not necessarily high breathing, but I thought that when you inhale, you hold the breath and then you release it versus inhale, exhale. And basically I remember the exact lesson. It was about August of 2010. And remember I was working on a role for Caramore actually. And it was fine, but there was some high moments in passaggio. And for some reason I was nailing it, but it's like the last one goes a half step higher. And it's like, I don't know why I'm not getting this. He said, well, you're breathing correctly on the notes before, but you need to really breathe on the notes before the high note. So that way you can line it up properly. Use less air. Think about just breathing. Don't think about vowels. Don't think about where it's supposed to go. It will fix itself. And then once you learn how to do that, then you can go and A-E-I-O-U. So it was in that voice lesson, I got so frustrated with myself because when it was right, it was right. But when it was wrong, it was wrong and wrong. Like, I mean, Cracksville, it was just, and it's like, I don't care. Like everybody at some point cracks in a voice lesson or in performance. And if you haven't, good for you. If you have, I applaud you.
If you haven't, you haven't been singing long enough.
If you haven't cracked into performance, you have not lived life, my friend. You know, because these are important moments for us because one, it shows our growth. Two, it shows maturity. Three, it shows humbling because you're constantly learning. And so you might mess up somewhere. And it's like, oh, how do I fix that? And then you fix it because you know how. And now that I know how to breathe, on my worst day, I can get up and perform. And it would seem as though it's 100%, even though for me it might be 30 because I'm not, I'm tired or I didn't drink enough water. But as long as my breathing is my foundation, it sets everything up for me.
So when you think about, because everybody uses this word breathing, right? And some people, it means really different things. Like some people are talking about, oh, it's the inhale. And other people refer to the support muscles. And then some people refer to how the phonatory muscles actually control the exhalation of air or the phonation. So do you think about it? How do you break it down for us who don't know?
I'm used to this concept that if you know how to balance the amount of air pressure coming from your body, then you can dictate all of those things that you just said. And two exercises for me that helped me to understand that was, I was told in a coaching session, it was many, many years ago, I was auditioning for the Met competition and it was probably 9 a.m. And nobody likes to sing that early, but sometimes you got to sing. And I remember being in a coaching session and the coach said, I'm going to give you a warm-up that I used to use when I worked with Stephen Sondheim and Broadway. Because, everyone that was I've worked with a bunch of teachers that were I worked with them and they got me to the point where I needed to be. And then I got to the next teacher and then it was just a gradual, advancement for me. But this one coach said to me, basically you're folding your body in half and you're bending your knees just so you can support yourself in your heels. You place your hands on your lower back and you inhale and you exhale doing a tongue trill, not a lip trill. So, and what you realize is as you inhale, your lower back muscles expand to the maximum. And as you do the lip trill, you're constantly using those muscles to expel that air in the back, but you're naturally letting the flap in the front support the sound. So as you go up chromatically and you go higher and higher, there's more air. So you're expanding your lower back, and you're also warming up your body physically, one, because you're folded over, two, you're forcing your body to plant your feet. I mean, this takes like a minute. You can do this in a minute. And gradually you unhook and you start to slowly stand up, still planting your feet, still putting your hand in your back. And by the time you stand straight up, you have no tension in your lower body, and you inhale, and it's almost as if there's two of you. Wow. It's the most amazing experience. And I thought about this process and I thought, oh, this is weird. Where have I heard this before? And the late 𝐸𝐿𝐸 𝐸𝐿𝐸 was doing an interview, and he was talking about how he would prepare for his breathing and how he had these long, luscious phrases. He said, well, I swim a lot. Yeah. And it's basically the non-swim version of swimming. It's basically 2 minutes. And I mean, vocally, you're warming up your cords, you're warming up your body, you're warming up your breathing. And in 5 minutes, if you want to do vocalises, you can, but in 5 minutes, realistically, if you had to do a show, boom, you can just go on. It's amazing. And the second exercise, and this is a random one, the same teacher I worked with on breathing handed me a balloon. And I said, I probably told you about this story once, but handed me a balloon. I said, okay. He said, I want you to blow up this balloon. And I said, sure. So I'm just turning it on. And I blew up the balloon, and he said, you're using too much air. And I said, I don't understand. And he said, put your hands on your cheeks. And I held the balloon like this. And I wish I had a balloon to show you. I've been looking. And he goes,
okay.
Cheeks pop out. He said, this is what I want you to do.
Oh.
And I didn't understand that. I said, okay. And so the concept was, you're using the same amount of air, you're just supporting the air in a natural flow. And in doing so, blowing up the balloon this way versus, and that, in retrospect, enhanced my understanding of onset versus offset of breathing. Oh. And you're not punching the sound. You're lightly allowing your body to settle and then release the air versus forcing the air out. So it was a double lesson for me. Wow. And then my warm-up was the William Tell. And I would go up half steps, and people would look at me like I'm crazy outside of auditions or concerts or at Carnegie Hall. And I'm like, I just need 2 minutes. And I'm getting all these looks. It's like, is that your warm-up? I'm like, yeah, warm-ups are not supposed to be pretty. And you go out and you slay and you come off stage, and they're just like, okay, I need you to tell me exactly what just happened. And I'm like, my name's Jorell. And I walk off, and that's it. So that breathing really saved my career. Or not saved it. I think I would have been fine. I think it took me to a level I don't think I would have achieved had I not taken the time off to really focus on that one thing that solidified ultimately me being able to have a career to this day. Yeah. Okay. And did you so you were blowing up the balloon with the William Tell overture in falsetto. Is that correct? That's how you warmed up? Yes. Wow. Mm-hmm. Is there a reason you would do it in falsetto and not full voice? Yes. So for me, the very first voice lesson I had was my teacher in undergrad, Thomas Goodhart. To this day, he is my staple. I love Tom. And I just spoke to him a couple of weeks ago, but he was telling me as a student, the best way to learn is to understand that not every teacher has all the answers. Mm-hmm. And I thought to myself, but you're going to be my teacher for 4 years. So if I have a question and you don't have an answer, how does this work? And he's like, that is the great question that we have to ask ourselves as we get older and as we understand more about the voice. There will be things that I try to teach you that you don't understand now, you learn later, and when you come back, you understand. And then we build from there. And that is exactly what happened. But getting back to your point, he really instilled this idea of, this is going to sound not really an answer, but to expect, to kind of be in the middle of expectation when you're working on yourself and working on the stability of your performing capabilities. Because if you try to overdo it constantly, mentally, I'm only speaking mental. If you try to overdo it while you're anticipating greatness, that tends, when you underscore or undershoot it, there's no coming back from that. There's this mental thing about singers when you don't come through for yourself.
Oh, wow.
It's just the worst. You can go down a very dark hole. I'm fortunate enough that that was the first lesson I learned. And going back to the first thing we just talked about, cracking in a voice lesson, it's like, all right, he's like, great, you cracked. And you're going to crack 20 more times before you get to your sophomore year. And then you can take one out every year. And then 20 years from now, you might have two. And over a period of a career, you will have hundreds of performances, and you can probably count on 3 fingers, 3 performances that you were maybe between 90 and 100%. Everything else, you're sitting between 50 and 80. And that's just a realistic number that we can have in order for us to, I just cracked it. I'm not even saying it's like it's a realistic number. So when you do slightly do 85 or 90, you're just like, oh, today was a good day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's okay.
So is that part of the psychology behind the falsetto then?
Yes.
So that you're not freaking yourself out, or?
Don't freak yourself out. And to add to that, the falsetto and the lower register, honestly, complement each other. There is a perception that you have to constantly warm up the middle of your voice, which is true to an extent. But when you know where the depth of your voice lies and you know what your extension is, in accessing your falsetto right away, that allows you to understand what the heady sound that you can create. You can have wah mix, but at the same time, with the lift at the soft palate, at the lower register, you still have that lift. Yeah. And so you have this accordion effect. Some people say rubber band. You have this accordion effect that you can literally do this with your voice. And that starts with the bottom of the voice, and it starts with the falsetto.
Okay. So would you say it's a complete myth? Like I hear sometimes baritones or even some tenors saying that, the falsetto, you don't need to train the falsetto to be an opera singer. Would you say that's a myth?
I do. Yeah, that's a myth, because some people classify falsetto as just soft singing. I think it's just terminology. Also, if you're considering what a person's range is, generally for basses, bass baritones, and baritones, once we're at about C natural, D, maybe E flat, depending on which of those 3 you are, your voice might shift into a different space and color based on how much you're, what value you're singing on, whether it's a high note or if it's something that you're holding or you're caressing a note. We approach it differently than a tenor would. Also, I also want to say male sopranos and countertenors also have this affect, because there's this misconception or truth to countertenors or male sopranos being able to also perform baritone repertoire. Yeah. And I do know 2 or 3 singers that actually have access to both of those Fox. I've heard them sing Largo al factotum to perfection, and then they turn around and sing a Handel aria, and it's like, what's happening?
Yeah, I've heard this
because they have full access,
Right. So you feel that the falsetto does train and inform your top notes?
Absolutely, yes. Okay. And it also allows you to not punch it.
Yeah.
I think there's this idea that you have to bring up a weighty sound if you're a baritone. And while there is a natural resonance, because we generally sing where we speak for the majority of the roles that we do, once we have to adjust in the upper register, you do have to add that height and that lightness, this airiness. And I guess the best way for me to explain that with breathing, or even with falsetto, it's kind of like you're in a rocket ship, and it's like lift off 3, 2, 1, and you're going up. And as you go up, there's a perception that you have to bring up all this weight and all this air. But in reality, space has no gravity. And in reality, as you go up through the different layers of the atmosphere, your breathing condenses and becomes more compressed, unless you're wearing a helmet. And in that helmet, it allows you to have this. Mm-hmm. So that is your falsetto. Your falsetto is your helmet in space. And that is my explanation.
And you just fed me my title. There we go.
Thank you very much.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so take me back to your early training. I'm very curious how people began. What were some of the issues I know you talked about breathing, but take me even further back. What were some of the vocal issues that you had to overcome? How did you work through them?
One of my earliest, this is going to sound weird, but not. Again, I was not classically trained. So when I entered undergrad, it was because I initially wanted to do the music education program for piano and do piano, because I was a pianist. 9/11 had just happened. New York State had cut the majority of the funding for education. So I'm coming into my audition. I had to cancel the other 7 because they weren't flying it. You couldn't fly. And it was the one school that I was like, well, it's close enough to home. I have a show tonight. Let me do this audition. And I get to the audition and say, well, glad you're here, but the education program is canceled. But we have a voice program and we have an accompaniment program. And it's kind of what happened. So I was not aware of what the classical program was. And that being said, that automatically put me at the bottom of the class because everyone else understood that they wanted to train to be an opera singer. And while I had sung classical because of lessons in high school, I didn't know what that entailed. I knew you had to study languages. I know you had to work on singing and coaching and these microcosms of how to create an opera singer. But I had no clue what I was getting in at all. And I remember the first week of class, and I credit my training for where I am today. Every week you had to learn a song in Italian, and every week everyone had to sing it, and then you coast it. And then you had to memorize the text. You had to do it, the poetry, word for word and idiomatically. And it was just like, and if you messed up, you had to start over. Like, it was just fear factor. But it was such an incredible experience that I'm so grateful for, because that was kind of how I figured out that I could do it, because I was not the best technical singer in my first year because I wasn't classically trained. My second week in college, though, because I had a lower register, I was bass 1 in high school, it was lasciatemi morire. And I remember the week before, I maybe had a C natural, and when I got to D, it was like, oh, ma really? It was a mess. The second week, it was lasciatemi morire, lasciatemi morire. And everyone went literally like this. And it was the funniest thing to me, because the teacher just went, oh, there is a voice there. And I shrugged and I sat down. And it was just, for me, it was, and then the next week it was a hot mess. But, you're a miss. And gradually I understood that I had to work really hard in order to figure out what that meant to me. Fast forward to my junior year, I did the Westchester Vocal Institute. Now, this was one of the first times publicly outside of a university setting that I performed in front of an audience for whatever it might be. And at this time, Ken Benson was still, I think he was still with Cami, and he was one of the masterclass people, and he also taught and had this amazing course on the history of music. And like, I credit him for even helping me discover who I was. And I don't remember exactly what I was singing for him, but he said, you have to trust where you are today and know that when you move forward, that this will be the catalyst for you. Know that you are meant for this. And it was such an empowering thing for me. And to this day, when I see him, it's just, I look at him, I think, he's everything that you want and more. He was such a support then. He's such a supportive person now. This was the same year I met David and Barbara Bender from the Career Bridges Foundation and Arthur Levy, and they had done a joint masterclass. Now, this is funny, and this will answer your question. I was working on Queen Mab, Harlequin, Barber of Seville, and the Count's aria, I think. I don't remember. So you basically present like 3 or 4 arias, and basically they kind of coach you on it. And I'm sorry, and I left out Minotti's Bob's aria from Old Man.
Oh, yeah.
Bob's aria.
Bob.
Things of summer. Right. And I remember there was a, oh, and I didn't know how to, I wanted to sound like a baritone. So it was like, oh, or it was, ah. And I remember Arthur Levy saying, Jorell, you have the note. Put your hand on your chest, feel the inhalation, release the inhalation, trust your breathing. And he said, inhale, don't hold it, and release. And I did it, and a different note came out. And I swear to you, there was a woman in the back. It was an elderly lady, one of the donors. She said, well, honey, that sounds like a man. And everyone started laughing. It was amazing. But for me, it was validation. It's like, oh, I just have to like learn how to breathe. And then that was my trajectory, you know?
Yeah.
That was my first live experience of having a meltdown. Not like like they didn't know I was melting down. I thought it was hilarious that it happened, but it's like, you can't do this professionally and not know what you're doing. And the other misconception is the following year, same situation, I had kind of figured out how to maneuver through my voice. But the problem is I had high notes, but it was everything underneath that, maybe about F natural, that was like, you don't turn on that note. Are you a tenor?
Oh, yeah.
And I kid you not, for years, every competition I've ever done, I have gotten one of 2 things. How high do you vocalize? And what Verdi do you sing? And with the Verdi comment, it's, would you ever consider switching to tenor? And my response has always been, no. I'm just mentally not there. But also, I'm staying in my lane. Like, I know what I want to do. And I'm going to continue to do it. I'm not going to let the traditional trajectory of, if your voice is going this direction, you should probably go in this direction. No, I'm 1000% sure I'm a baritone, and that's where I'm going to stay. That's it. End of conversation. I might have access to an extension, but my voice lives where it lives. And I'm not going to try to, for me, this is my personal opinion, I don't want to overextend into, at this point in my life and career, into something to have to start over because it may not go well. And then I'm stuck, because then you can't go back. Yeah. Because you have to relearn what you had to relearn how to sing. Yeah. And it's just, it's too much. So for me, at least, I want to just stay right where I am. And I'm totally comfortable with that in all genres of music.
That's awesome. What would you say that, like, a role that you either are preparing or have sung, what is a role that feels like, oh, this was written for my voice? Or a couple?
There's like 2. I mean, Figaro, Barbara Seville, just because I feel like I'm Figaro in real life, in real time, most of the time. So that, but also, this is going to sound weird and contradictory to in the traditional sense, but whenever I work with a new composer, there's this idea or conversation that has to be had. And this is for all the people composing out there. When you're writing for singers, a lot of the times we don't have the conversation of, how does your voice work? A lot of the times it's, especially with microtonal music, it's, I wrote this really cool idea, now sing it. Versus, you wrote something that's humanly impossible to sing, for my voice in that register. Take it down 2 octaves and maybe we can have a conversation, you know? And so, I mean, these are honest conversations we have to have. So when I'm fortunate enough to work with a composer who just, it's already right in the pocket, and because the music is so alive and current, for me, I've been very fortunate in that every composer I've worked with has been very flexible. If something doesn't work, if a word doesn't work, if a vowel doesn't work, if a note seems funny, or if it's orchestrated too heavy or too lightly, we communicate, you know? And because at the end of the day, we're trying to do justice to your piece, and we can't do that as singers if you're writing something that doesn't allow us to do that for you. So therefore, it's a lose-lose situation versus let's adjust 1 or 2 things and everybody goes home happy.
Yeah.
So those are my 2.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Okay, I'd love to transition. You're talking about turning.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe a successful turn? The sensation of a successful turn?
One that doesn't crack. Come on, you walked into that. A successful turn for me.
What are the ingredients? Yeah.
The ingredients is making sure that your onset for the note or notes or leap before passing through the passaggio is prepared within the vowel that your turn is going to be in, so that way it's a seamless turn. And what I mean by that is, this is pedagogy, but like weird pedagogy. If I'm singing 𝐿 mi fa, if I know for me, I need 𝐿 in order to keep my soft palate up, because 𝐴 is such a frontal vowel. And while Italian, this is the 𝐚𝐜𝐜𝐞𝐬𝐬 way of singing, you want the sound to sound like that. But I can sing fa in fe, 𝐿 mi fa, and it's the same thing. There's backspace, there's headspace, and the vowel comes this way. So it's just knowing what vowel to add to the vowel before you approach the passaggio. So that way your throat position is already formulated mentally to where you will end up going. So you're not trying to find it on the way up. And I think in doing that very slowly in practice, it will allow you every single time to go through the circle of fifths of those vowels and just cleanly, no matter if it's an a, u, e, just seamlessly just go back and forth.
So when you're telling me that, I'm kind of thinking, like I'm translating in my own head, and you're saying these vowels help you turn. But when I heard you kind of demonstrate, I know it was like 𝐻𝐜 voce, but the demonstration,
That's good, I'm gonna keep that.
But the demonstration kind of showed me that vowel sounded very much like fa, right? But you were thinking that I space.
Correct.
Is that a tongue position that you are employing to keep that?
No, I think for me, my natural ah is ah. There is there's a natural slight tilt generally when we go up through the register anyway, at least
tilt
for
of what?
baritons, I think.
Tilt of what?
Well, there's a slight tilt of the larynx, just naturally.
Oh, tilt of the larynx. Oh, okay.
There's a slight tilt of the larynx, and in that happening, when you're dropping your jaw, there is a natural luft in the back of the tongue, or the tongue on the back of your bottom molars that allows you to, one, also create the space. It's not necessary because there's also another concept of keeping everything tight and forward while still having that thing. And I know for example, if I was singing an African-American spiritual, instead of doing like close mouth, I would do ah or there's more resonance. You're still getting but it's not a tight You know what I mean? So that's the concept of releasing the jaw enough to not confine the vowel to what traditionalists say about where the vowel should be placed, and allowing the sound to go where it's supposed to go while slightly making adjustments to the tongue. With that, I will add this. One of the things I worked on to release tongue pressure.
Mhm.
Because a lot of people talk about lip trills and massaging the jaw and massaging the neck and all that stuff. True. However, to gain the most access to the tongue, if you stretch it a little bit before you do warm-ups and all that, it makes it just easier to kind of just do this versus you're constantly trying to get the tongue to move.
Yeah.
And an example would be doing an E vowel. Instead of E, what it naturally does is it lowers the larynx. It pulls the tongue forward to the extent that you're not hurting yourself, just so you can see where the muscle tension is in the back of your tongue.
Okay.
And
Are you still trying to say E? Are you still trying to say E when you do that?
You're still trying to say E, and it might not come out as E.
Okay, yeah.
E, A, I, O, O. So, gradually for me, what that does is I can feel this shifting in the tongue.
Yeah.
That it's releasing the tension. So I know some people do this or they do this.
Yeah.
That is basically the simplified version of that.
Okay.
And then what you're doing is you're warming up your tongue at the same time you're warming up your larynx and your cords. So it's like a triple warm-up.
It's a triple warm-up.
It's kind of awesome. And then you can sing an E vowel and you're not pulling because E is such a tight vowel in general. And I know for French and for German repertoire specifically, there is a very noticeable difference between closed and open. And in Italian, you can get away with it depending on what you're singing and what your voice box is. But for German and French, or maybe there's other languages, it's got to be one or the other. And that exercise will help you differentiate between the two, while at the same time creating a happy medium. So that way, if you did in between, it would come across as whatever vowel you're trying to form, especially in E vowel or closed vowels. Okay.
So you feel that tongue stretching. Where do you feel, what part of the tongue is stretching?
So that if you're at the top of your head in the center, and you say, and you drop right back down in the middle, it's just before the tongue drops back down.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's basically just releasing that tension, because we release the tension from here, and people do this.
Right.
Which is releasing the top. But what are you doing about the center of the tongue?
Right.
That will release the tension from the center of the tongue. And it's kind of like a masseuse when they're, people think, oh no, let me rub your shoulders. No, you have to find the center of the issue. You pinpoint it, you hold it, you let it kind of spread and release, and then you can work it from the center out versus working your way into something, but you don't really know what you're working on.
Yeah.
It's the same with tension and your tongue.
Okay. And do you feel people talk about, what are the three offenders? They talk about the tongue, they talk about the jaw, and they talk about the lips. So do you have any tricks for jaw, or is that not usually an issue for you? Lip or jaw tension?
I've never really had jaw tension. I do occasionally when I'm feeling tight-throated, I'll just do that, just a generic massage. And most of my tension comes, I used to get migraines, like back of the neck migraines, and I actually tore my 𝐚𝐞𝐴𝐼𝐻𝐿 muscle.
Oh my gosh.
My dog, so I couldn't even turn to the right for like 6 months. It was like the worst. So I had to kind of figure out how to alleviate that. And I actually did have on my right side, it was a lot of tension from just below the earlobe and the jawline down to my collarbone and sternum. And for 6 months, it was just figuring out what that meant. And so I'm very aware of like the tension if I have it here, which is, it's kind of like when you eat something sour and you're like, oh my God, this is delicious. And it's like, ping, you get that thing. It's like, it's good, but it hurts, but it's amazing. I get that sensation if something is kind of like tight, but it's never been bad. It's usually like, okay, you just need to like actually find the right vowel and warm up my tongue. And for me, that just works. And lip trills, tongue trills, as I said, those three things, they just set you up for success every single time.
Yeah. What's your hardest challenge vocally? Like, meaning it can be a piece that you sing, part of a role. Like, give me an example of something that you would have to work on vocally and how you would go through that process.
That's a good question. This has been the longest time that I think a lot of us have had off for reasons not having to do with illness, personal illness, or scheduling, or what it might be. I mean, there's this general sense that everyone's in the same boat because theaters aren't open. And so there are a lot of people performing still. There are a lot of people still practicing, and it's a beautiful thing. For me, I decided this was the time for me to take a mental break and see what it would be like to not, one, for me just to know what that would feel like, and then having the experience of, okay, it's been month number 4, I have something in 6 months, I need to be ready. How do I prepare for that? Knowing I will be 100% rusty, and or not, and knowing that every day is going to be different. So this has kind of been the challenge of what to do in between things. And there's, for me, not a fear. There is I have an understanding with myself that there will be days that things go well, and there will be days where I'm feeling 100% and everything can go wrong. And that has to do with just being on a happy median of not expecting too much of myself, but being nothing short less than excellent in what I'm doing. Because as long as I'm trying my best and giving it 100%, it might not come out right today, but at least I've taken the right steps to get to where I will be in the position of excellence.
Okay.
I think that's a good answer.
So basically it's it's process, it's breaking things down. What to give me some, a little bit more practical.
I've always been a thinker, and whenever I'm approaching a role for the first time, for example, I'll give an example. I just did Charlie Parker's Yardbird at Seattle Opera, and historically for me, it's like, oh my God, I get to be Dizzy Gillespie. And there's a lot of research and video on him performing, especially in live form, where he was famous for like randomly improvising something. It's like, okay, I'm going to write a song. So this is the melody. And then he would tell the audience to do it. And he was like, oh, come to hear me do it 5 times. And he'll slow it down. And it was just, that was his thing. And it was a beautiful thing. And for me, as I mentioned, I do a bunch of contemporary music, to be able to step into his mind and what that must be like. There's not a lot of documented things on Charlie Parker, but we know his story. And so within the piece, it wasn't a matter of like, how do you fit into this role? It's like, oh no, this is just me on a Thursday. But to have to extrapolate a tender moment during a funeral scene, while everyone on the stage is having these emotional outbursts, and kind of stay still while watching, it was like, for me, that professionally, that was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, because of the emotional attachment that I've had to not just the people that I'm performing with as friends and colleagues, but to this actually this captivating story. And I remember the second to last performance, Angela Brown, bless her heart, she just nailed, I mean, she's a legend, but she just emotionally just kicked everyone out of the room. It was like, this is Charlie Parker's Yardbird, but it's really the Angela Brown show, because she just gave us the goods. And I'm just staring at her like, I have to sing in 2 seconds. And I physically could, like, my throat clamored up. I couldn't do it. I had to mentally check out. And I'm looking at the maestro, and he's just like, I got you, baby. I got you. And I'm looking at him. I'm like, no, you don't. No, you don't. And it was this amazing energy. And Kelly Corey's he's one of those people that if you work with him every time, it's going to be great every time. because that was the energy of the group. It was such a
Yeah.
loving, supportive thing. And even though I didn't feel as though I could have done my best in that scenario, because it was my first time for me experiencing something like that, by the time we got to the double bar line, we had, Q&A after the performance. And a lot of the feedback was not that, oh, well, he was emotionally invested in singing. It's like, we really felt your pain. We really felt the connection. You really love this man. And like, you couldn't physically sing because it was so hard. It was so beautiful because you sang so beautiful. And I'm like, yeah, exactly. Yeah, you get it. And in my head, I'm like, boy, take this to a practice room. But it also shows, going back to the beginning, if you learn how to breathe, one, it calms you down. Two, it sets you up. Even if it isn't perfect, you at least can stay on track.
Yeah.
And I learned that years and years of being meticulous, of getting out of my own head, allowed for this experience to not have been one where I could have crashed and burned. Yeah.
It's funny because I've performed with you several times, and I always, when I watch you perform, I just think like I know you are sometimes thinking about technique, but you never let it show. You are always like 110% committed to the character that you're singing, and like the whole dramatic perspective of whatever you're singing. I find that so awesome. And while you're doing that, you're maintaining glorious sounds.
Oh, thank you.
So
I'm really thinking about which donor to sing to. Show us the money, baby.
Yeah, right. I love it. Okay. So what I would love for you to tell me is your one vocalise that you would do to get yourself ready to sing in 5 minutes. Your desert island vocalise, if you can't have any other vocalise.
It would be my tongue trill exercise.
Okay.
It would be that.
Which is the one with the back where you lower.
Back. Yeah, where you just,
yes. Okay.
Because it's a full body warm up, literally top to bottom. If I had to have a check-in warm up as well, just to make sure the top was there, it would be oi 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 oi. That the famous Marlena Malice oi ois.
Oh, that's a famous one. Show me what that is.
Oi 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 oi. And what that is, it's just, it combines the headiness of sound, but also the releasing of air and depth of sound. I'm just saying words, but that's one of the very first things I ever had to learn how to do.
Yeah.
And I remember being fascinated with Tom Goodhart, and he said, well, it's basically just pretend you're eating an apple. And I'm like, that makes no sense to me because now I'm hungry. Like, what does that mean? He's like, this apple's delicious. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, 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 yeah. And it was just, I would laugh at my lessons because I'm like, what is he talking about? Lo and behold, he was right the entire time. And I'm going to throw one more bonus out there just because it's so cool. It's such a cool concept that it took me 4 years to learn this from him, but it's a Coke bottle exercise. And what it is basically the sound, people say drinking in the sound. Yeah. Basically, this is that exercise, but it basically proves that as long as you have up and back, you have forward. And it's the Coke bottle effect of, I'm just doing this because it's Coke bottle, but versus you're not looking the sound. It's just, you're setting up the open space, you're opening the throat, you're opening the upper space, and it's just
that almost sounds like a Coke bottle.
Yeah.
It really does.
And that's it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So that just kind of reminds you, that's a little check-in. Your bonus desert island exercise. I love it. So Jorell, I mean, this is a sore subject, as I just read right before we hopped on this interview that 𝐚𝐜𝐞𝐬𝐬, I think, is canceling the rest of their season through February. So I hate even bringing this up, but
bring it up.
But I would like to ask you, what do you have coming up?
Well, here's the thing. Because for me, I mean, I've been in constant communication with every organization that I have had something coming up with, going back to March. And before everything started to shut down, I was in Birmingham doing a production just before the Yardbird in Seattle. And I had spoken to someone about something happening in May because they weren't sure it was going to happen, because they didn't know it was, you know, the United States was going to kind of in a weird place because they weren't talking about it, COVID-19. And, but they were anticipating these conversations happening, but wanted to take several measures to make sure that we were in constant communication before any decisions were made. And so I want to say about March 5th, we were in the last 2 or 3 performances of Yardbird. And I had heard from several of the organizations I was working with saying, we are going to anticipate postponing. We want to let you know now, but we want to also give you first rights for next season when we shift our season to next season and or the season after. So we're letting you know now before we make announcements.
Okay.
And so that was really thoughtful of them to do that.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I know a lot of the companies are strapped for cash because that is a huge, you know, a lot of the funding goes for the season and the next season. So they have to kind of maneuver. And so everything kind of moved to next season. So I've had this amazing amount of time to just sit back and do what I want, which is, you know, creative stuff. And I'm not going to get too much into it because it ruins the surprise. But when it does happen, it will hit people over the head. And they're going to be like, oh yeah, that actually makes sense. Cool. Yeah, he's doing that. So I'm going to keep those cards close to my chest. We can discuss another time. And, but most of the things I have coming up are either just mini concerts happening, some art song thing that have already been planned since before. Yeah. It's just everything's going to be digital. I'm supposed to go to Italy for something, I want to say in October, but that's not happening anymore. I'll probably at some point end up doing a concert tour with my group Legacy Secured with Justin Austin, Kenneth Overton, and Damian Sneed. We're kind of working on a reunion tour. It's just we've all kind of gradually been doing everything else possible, which is amazing. It's just now is the time that we're actually able to sit and plan things. So that's something that I'm looking forward to with them. Yeah, that's just pretty much it. Everything was postponed. Awesome.
Yeah.
And I'm actually okay with that because safety first.
Yeah.
And I've appreciated this time to really think about what my career means, not to me, but the people that I associate in my life, such as my family, and how that this takes a huge toll on those relationships sometimes because you don't get to see them. And so being able to see my nephews and my nieces and my brothers and sisters and friends who I haven't spoken to in a long time. And it's nice to reconnect on a normal level versus a rushed scenario, because we're only in a place for 3 to 4 days or 6 weeks, and then we hop on the plane and we have to go somewhere else. It's nice to kind of be in one place with your significant other and your family and just be. And I think coming out of this, when we do, because we will, I hope that the perspective is one of gratefulness and grace, but also a humbling one, because it's proof that in one fell swoop, everything could be taken away. So to appreciate what we have while we have it, just like our voices, when our careers are done, all we can do is look back on the experiences we had. These conversations that I'm having with you will be more fruitful 20 years from now when we're having this conversation with New York Congress, with the Obamas, you know, the Obama and I'm looking forward to that, Jill. It's going to be great. So
that's awesome.
That's kind of where I'm at. I'm sure that through adversity, we will, we'll come through. We're going to be okay.
Absolutely.
And we will sing together again.
Oh, yes.
It's going to happen.
That's going to happen. You sooner than later, you're going to teach me how to hook and push.
Oh, please.
Well, Jorell, thank you so much for coming and talking to me today. It's been so nice to get to hear your expertise on your singing, and not just all of your expertise about life, which is so fantastic too, FYI, folks.
Oh, you're so sweet. Thank you for having me. And I am no expert. I am still learning. I'm still listening. I'm still watching. So if anything, I will leave you with this. See, I'm not warmed up. It's been 4 months. I'm like, I'll leave you with this. There is a way for us to continue growing while we have this time. And I lost my thought, but it was a good one.
I was really excited. You had me.
No, I was like, I was gonna nail it.
But ultimately, I think what you wanted to say is we're all in the process of becoming all the time. And if you're not learning and moving forward, you're probably regressing and moving backwards.
Thank you. Oh my God. You may remember by saying the word regressing. Trigger. We have to become more fluent in being active listeners, just in general in life. And in doing that, while we are practicing our art form, by actively listening, you learn at a more advanced rate than if you just hear what you want to hear for the sake of it. Because there's a difference between someone trying to show you how to do something and giving you the tools, and that there are 7 different ways to do it, versus them doing it, you taking what you want to take from it, which is fine. You take things with a grain of salt, but you don't really learn why or how. You have to actively learn how to listen and to watch and to absorb. Because
boy, is that important.
You get so lost in translation, and then 5 years from now, you have no recollection of what it was that you were trying to latch on to, because you really were not paying attention. You know, so.
And I know you were directing that at vocal technique, but that can be directed at so many things.
Absolutely, and I mean it for everything too. But in vocal technique, absolutely yes. And that's something I tell myself every day. I mean, I've done a few recordings for some concerts here and there, but knowing that I can be home in my own space and have the freedom to record something 20 times if I want to, blooper reel. I have to tell myself, okay, Jorell, you don't want to do this the 21st time. You need to figure this out. What is happening? And I have to listen to where things go wrong. So it's like, I know how to fix this. And it's not about having degrees. No. I can have a degree in marine biologist and not know what I'm doing when I get hired for a job. I can have a residency at a hospital and not know how to procure a needle. Like, so it doesn't matter how long you've taken to do something. Anyone can pick up information, absorb it, and do it. Yeah. And I think if we do that, we'll be better for it. Because not only can we reciprocate that by projecting our gifts to an audience, we can also give back to other generations when we're teaching them what it means to be an active performer and an active listener, because they do go hand in hand.
Oof, I love that.
That's a sermon. Hey.
Preach. And with that, I bid you adieu.
Thank you, love. That was nice.
So nice.